And here's a 5-minute podcast review for Monday, August 31st, 2020. And like many in the world, I am still in lockdown. Here in Melbourne, Australia, it's a particularly harsh lockdown with an 8 p.m. curfew. And even during the day, we're only allowed out for 1 hour's exercise. And we're looking at least another 2 weeks of this before things might loosen up a bit. On the podcast front, all the data I'm seeing is that podcast listening is down a bit, with everyone indoors, often in shared living quarters. Things like watching Netflix and doing group jigsaw puzzles are more the go than sticking in the earbuds and listening to podcasts, which makes sense. Podcast listening, it tends to be a bit of a solo thing. But that said, the podcast listening audience is definitely broadening, with Spotify now well in the game, taking podcasts to a whole raft of new listeners, including many in the Android brigade. So here's a quick rundown of a few of the podcasts I've been listening to in the past few weeks that you might want to check out for yourself. First up is The Infinite Monkey Cage, which has been around for years, but for some reason I've only just got into it, but I'm now ploughing slowly through the back episodes. Basically, each episode takes on some mind-bending but fascinating, usually scientifically oriented subject like, does time exist, or quantum worlds, or are we living in a simulation, through to more down-to-earth subjects like what is sleep, the secret life of birds, the teenage brain, or microbes. Typically, the two hosts are joined by a panel consisting of two specialists on the topic being discussed, as well as one non-expert. Often that's the obligatory comedian of some sort. I mean, where would comedians be these days if they didn't have podcasts to host or to be guests on? But the key thing to know is that The Infinite Monkey Cage is very accessible. Okay, maybe you do need to be a bit of an enthusiastic amateur with a leaning towards the science and the meaning of life type questions, but you don't need a PhD in the subject, and you can rely on the hosts or the non-expert guest to act on behalf of us as listeners and pull up the experts and ask the basic questions. Some might say the stupid questions, although I think of them as the questions you'd ask an expert if you were, say, at a dinner party with them, to use that cliche. But really, I've learned quite a lot from the episodes I've listened to so far, and I've had a few of those questions I've often wondered about or not really understood made a lot more clear to me. I suppose the other thing to know is that The Infinite Monkey Cage is from the BBC, so it has that typically British, self-depreciating but intelligent humour, slightly Monty Python-esque, as indeed the theme song for the podcast, which I'm just bringing up in the background, was written and sung by ex-Python Eric Idle.
This linear superpositional thing is blowing my mind away. The universe seems to be made out of string. That's what some particle physicists say. If infinite monkeys type every day, they may accidentally write Hamlet the play, but they probably just shit on it and throw it away. In the infinite monkey, the cheeky monkeys, in the infinite monkey cage, without your trousers, in the infinite monkey cage. Oi!
So there are a ton of episodes to check out going back to 2013, and I'm pretty sure if you scroll the episode list, you'll find a few good trial episode topics to see what you make of The Infinite Monkey Cage. All right, what else have I been listening to? Uncomfortable Conversations is worth a mention. This is a rebranding of Josh Zepp's We the People podcast that I talked about 2 or 3 years ago. Or maybe it's more than just a rebranding. It's a conversation podcast, but the angle is around stepping out of our own echo chambers in this divided time to have, as the name suggests, uncomfortable conversations, or at least to listen to them. I'll just play a clip that stuck with me. This was a conversation with Stan Grant, an Aboriginal Australian journalist, in the context of Black Lives Matter. They were discussing the use of the N-word, and the conversation was all quite objective and spoken about from a distance, i.e. from Australia, when Stan Grant offered up this personal anecdote.
I was at a party and there was a well-known media person who's I would consider a friend and I would not consider to be racist at all, who was telling me a story about a relative and how the relative used to use a particularly pejorative term about Aboriginal people. and was sort of making the point of, oh, what a terrible racist he was. He used to say this. The moment that word was said, even in the context of relaying to me how this person thought that was appalling and how bad the uncle was for doing this, the moment that word was said, I felt sick. It was a visceral reaction to something that, if I think my way through it, I shouldn't have. But I was right back to when I was a kid and that was said. I was right back to when my father picked me up from school once and I was walking out with a group of boys who I considered my friends, who said, "Is that your father?" and then laughed. Even the use of the word within the social setting that it was, with a friend who thought that they were on comfortable ground with me, relaying a story that they were appalled by, the use of the word itself just made me feel sick. And I went away, and then I couldn't forget about it. For the rest of the day, I couldn't forget about it. And driving home, I told my wife Tracy about it, and I said, I really don't know what to do with this, and I don't know whether to go back and raise this again. In the end, I just let it slide because I didn't want to have that. I didn't want to make that person feel bad either. And but the use of these words, even within a context in which they appear to be acceptable, or at least you've created the parameters for a discussion where that word might be legitimately used, it still can, someone else hearing it can just be made to feel sick.
Okay, so that whole conversation is worth a listen. It's the first episode of Uncomfortable Conversations, but as I said, that perspective, that insight really did stick with me and was just, for me at least, a real moment of getting a new perspective, of seeing something through someone else's eyes. Currently there are 5 episodes of Uncomfortable Conversations up. I'm still working my way through them, but it seems worth checking out. Okay, something a little bit lighter to end on is Record Club. This is out of Canada, and it seems mostly to be recorded as a live storytelling event, as in recorded in front of an audience at a small club or pub. So each episode takes a classic record album and has a succession of people get up in front of the mic and tell a personal story connected with the album. So it's not a technical musical dissection of the album. In fact, sometimes it's stories that are not even directly related to the album, except that the album was the soundtrack to an event, a relationship, or some other event in the storyteller's life. I think a lot of us have those kinds of stories and experiences, particularly from the pre-streaming era of vinyl record albums, or I guess even CD albums. 2 good episodes of Record Club to sample are the ones on Radiohead's OK Computer and Fleetwood Mac's Rumours. Okay, that'll do it. 3 podcasts there to check out: The Infinite Monkey Cage, Uncomfortable Conversations, and Record Club. Links to all 3 are on your screen, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening.